Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating piece of hidden history that is literally going to rewrite what you think you know about one of the most famous sporting cultures on the planet. We are looking at the evolution of club identity, and specifically, how a movement known as Germânia fundamentally shaped Brazilian sports.
Now, when you think of Brazilian sports, especially football, right, you probably picture fluid passion, spontaneous creativity, and just this almost magical flair. But what if I told you the actual organizational foundation beneath these vibrant clubs, the structural blueprint that made professional sports in Brazil possible, is surprisingly different from that popular image?
Okay, let's dive into this. It turns out, the organizational DNA of modern Brazilian sports actually traces back to 19th century German immigrants. Operating under the banner of Germânia, these communities introduced a highly structured, rigorous blueprint for professionalization that forever changed the landscape of Brazilian athletics. They didn't just bring games with them, they brought a completely new way to organize them.
To understand this blueprint, we first need to understand the people who brought it. Let's look at Section 1, Building the German Enclaves.
This is a classic story of push and pull factors. Back in Europe, the period right after the Napoleonic Wars in 1815 was really rough. Social unrest was high, and land was incredibly scarce. Meanwhile, across the ocean in the 1820s, Brazilian Emperor Dom Pedro I was actively seeking European immigrants to develop vast southern territories. So by the mid-1800s, you start seeing these distinct German agricultural colonies, like São Leopoldo and Blumenau, taking root in southern Brazil.
Now imagine arriving in a totally new, isolated environment. To survive, these immigrants had to be incredibly organized. They relied heavily on mutual aid societies and quickly built up central community pillars, mainly churches and schools, to preserve their language and customs. They basically created deliberate strategies for community cohesion. And you know what? It was exactly this intense inward-facing communal organization that became the fertile soil for the very first sports associations.
Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds. Inside the Germania model.
The contrast here is absolutely striking. Before this German influence, local sporting structures in Brazil were largely informal. We're talking ad hoc gatherings, fluid participation, basically you play, you go home. But the Germania clubs brought serious bureaucracy to the table. Written charters, elected presidents, treasurers, and formal assembly procedures. It was a massive leap from casual play to real institutional stability.
So, the crucial point is the concept driving all of this, ordino. It translates to order, and man, it was absolute. This meant that training sessions weren't just haphazard kickabouts, they were methodical. Ordinum demanded punctuality, disciplined repetition of specific skills, and total respect for coaching authority. It completely transformed casual recreation into rigorous, systematic, and almost scientific athletic training.
And then there was Turnen, a German gymnastics movement that placed incredible moral and pedagogical weight on physical activity. To the Germania clubs, sports weren't just about winning a game. They were about holistic physical education and character development. The gymnastics club acted as a true community center, a place to build good citizens, not just good athletes.
If we distill this all down, we get the four core pillars of the Germania blueprint: structured governance, systematic discipline, collective identity, and a focus on specific sports. Notice how heavily that third pillar emphasizes the collective. In these clubs, the shared triumph of the community always outweighed individual superstar achievement. The team was literally an extension of the family.
Now, what were they actually playing? Well, these clubs championed and incubated several specific sports. Gymnastics was central for sure, but they also heavily promoted football, handball, athletics, and shooting. By bringing their rigorous organizational structure to these specific games, they set the perfect stage for them to spread across the entire country.
Which brings us to Section 3, Spreading the Sporting DNA.
So how did this highly insular immigrant blueprint leak out to transform the broader Brazilian sports landscape? And this brilliantly illustrates the exact mechanisms. First, through inter-club friendly matches. When non-German teams played these clubs, they witnessed their disciplined tactics firsthand. Second, through governance emulation. Other clubs realized they needed stability, so they copied the written statutes and elected committees. And finally, through pedagogical coaching, shifting the culture from talent-based recreation straight into scientific preparation.
The impact was so profound that the very word Germania became a brand. It was a symbolic signifier for organizational strength and sporting excellence.
Amazingly, clubs that had absolutely no German heritage whatsoever started adopting the name Germania. They did it simply to associate themselves with the prestige, order, and competitive success that the immigrant clubs had built.
Let's wrap up by looking at Section 4, the enduring cultural legacy. The long-term outcomes of the Germania blueprint are just massive. It sparked the actual professionalization of modern sports federations in Brazil, giving them the bureaucratic backbone they needed to thrive, while fostering a lasting culture of teamwork. Now, objectively speaking, because these clubs were built to preserve an immigrant culture, they were initially quite exclusive. But over time, they successfully integrated into and fundamentally shaped broader Brazilian society. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is a quote from the research that frames this perfectly. The sports club became a site where this negotiation played out, a dialectic between cultural preservation and adaptation. The immigrants beautifully preserved their old-world culture and values, but by sharing them on the playing field, they simultaneously forged a brand new Brazilian sporting culture. They didn't just hold on to the past, they structured the future.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating thought to take away. Whether you're watching a massive football tournament or just walking past your local athletic association, look past the game itself and look at the structure. Next time you see a highly organized community sports club, ask yourself, what hidden immigrant histories might form its foundation? The roots of our modern institutions are often hidden right in plain sight. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.